The classic strategy of taking a small salary and the rest is dividends is dead. The UK tax system has changed so much over the last few years that if you're still following that old formula, you're probably paying more tax than you need to. That doesn't mean salary and dividends no longer matter, but they're now a small part of a much bigger framework. I help business owners apply this strategy every day. So in this video, I'm going to show you why the old approach is no longer enough, what a smarter strategy looks like now, and why the right answer depends on your life, not just different tax rates. To start, I'm going to show you why following an outdated advice is probably costing you thousands. The old salary and dividend strategy is a bit like going on a family trip with one of these old paper roadmaps instead of a modern sat-nav. Yes, you might still reach the destination, but there is a good chance you take a slower road or end up stuck at a dead end. And with the cost of fuel these days, I want to make sure I'm taking the most efficient route. And that is basically what has happened with the old director pay strategy. For years, the advice for limited company directors was simple: take a small salary, the rest is dividends, and job done. But the tax environment is not what it was a few years ago, because the dividend tax is now higher, thresholds have stayed frozen and will remain frozen until 2031, salary costs more because employers' national insurance has gone up, so the old formula is weaker than it used to be. And that matters because a lot of directors are still treating salary and dividends like the whole answer, when in reality they're now just the starting point. If you run a limited company in 2026, what you really need to ask yourself is, what is the most efficient way for my company to support my life? Sometimes that still means a combination of salary and dividends, but sometimes the company creates value in a different way. For example, paying a family member a real salary for real work, paying into a pension scheme, using share structures so income is spread more efficiently across the household, and other planning opportunities I'll cover in a minute. That's why salary and dividends are now only one part of the plan, because once you widen the frame, the mindset changes from how do I pay myself to how do I get the most value out of this company with the least unnecessary tax. So once you've thought about this, the next obvious question is, where do I start? And the honest answer is, it depends on your personal circumstances and what you need from the company. Because the best strategy for someone running a side hustle is not the same as the best strategy for someone who uses the company profits to fund his life. And it's not the same for a husband and a wife setup, and it's also not the same for someone building a long-term wealth inside a company structure. So in the next part, I want to make this practical and walk you through a few real-life examples so you can see which type of strategy and which type of director sounds more like you. Before I get into the different types of directors, here is the mindset shift I want you to remember. A smart extraction strategy is not just about what lands in your bank account. It's also about everything the company can do within the rules to support your life more efficiently. Once you understand that, the right plan can change a lot depending on the person. In my view, there are four broad groups of limited company directors who have different life circumstances and pressures. And in a second, I'll go through each one in detail, and hopefully you will recognize yourself in at least one of them. The first group will probably be the biggest one watching. This is the solo director who needs the profits from their company to fund their life. Let's call this director Alex. Alex is the only director of a small limited company, and this business pays for his life. He uses salary and dividends to pay for everyday costs like mortgage, rent, food, the family car. So when people tell Alex to maximize his pension contributions so he can save tax, that sounds great until the electricity bill arrives and all the money are locked away in a retirement. And by the way, that's no attack on pensions. They're still one of the most tax efficient ways to extract value from the company. But if Alex needs cash now, he needs to prioritize different things. So if the company is profitable, he will often still use a mix of salary and dividends. But the extraction strategy becomes much more effective when you stop looking at these drawings in isolation. In other words, the goal is to reduce how much money the company needs to pay out to you in the first place. Because if the company can legally cover a cost he would normally pay himself, he may not need to take extra money from the company, pay tax on it, and then spend on that same thing. For example, he needs a smartphone anyway, so if the company takes out the contract in its own name, pays for that cost, then this is one less bill coming from taxed personal income. He works from home a lot, so if he genuinely needs office equipment, the company can buy it instead of him paying from his own pocket. He can also look into a home office arrangement where the company pays part of the household costs, but this area is much more complicated, so a professional advice is very important. He drives his own car to client meetings and jobs, so claiming business mileage means the business covers the work part of that cost, instead of Alex just quietly absorbing it and pretending tires and repairs are for free. He might use trivial benefits during the year. That's £300 per director you can spend on anything that's not cash or cash equivalent. It's not a life-changing amount, but you can get something nice for your home or for your loved one. And because each item has to cost less than £50 and the total limit is 300, you could buy up to 6 separate items. And this is the shift really. Instead of thinking, how do I take more money out to cover all this? The better question is, which of these costs can the company deal with properly in the first place? And in some cases, even a benefit that creates a benefit in kind tax charge can still come out better overall. Company car is the classic example. If the company owns or leases the vehicle and pays the running costs, it may still cost less overall than Alex taking more salary and dividends and paying for everything himself, especially if the vehicle is a low-emission electric vehicle. So even if he has to pay a small amount of personal tax on the benefit that the company provides, he could still be better off overall after careful consideration. And that's why you need to check the numbers with your accountant. And if Alex has a short-term cash hit, like a medical bill or a car repair, a director's loan can sometimes help bridge this gap. This is basically when you borrow money from your company. But it's not a magic money, and this is not something you want sitting around forever, because it has to be paid within 9 months after the end of your company year end. Otherwise, you can create an extra tax problems for no good reason. Also, if you borrow more than £10,000, it may be treated as a beneficial loan, which could trigger another benefit in kind tax charge. So for Alex, the strategy is not just small salary, rest is dividends. It is to create a strategy that supports his current life, keeps enough spendable cash available, and stops him taking out money just to pay for things the company could handle more efficiently anyway. That is a much more practical strategy for someone who needs the company to support his life now. And if Alex's situation sounds familiar and you want to improve your own setup, I've left a link in the description below where you can book a call with me and we can go through everything properly together. The next type of limited company arrangement is when spouses work together in the company. Let's call them Ben and Emma. They run a business together. Maybe they're both directors or they have equal share ownership. Now the strategy changes, because there is no longer just one person trying to get money out. We're now talking about a household. That means the planning can spread across 2 people instead of everything going through one person. Let's say Ben spends 40 hours a week handling most of the client work and Emma spends 20 hours on marketing, admin and bookkeeping. Now you have 2 personal allowances, 2 dividend allowances, 2 basic rate bands, 2 sets of trivial benefits, and because of that the household is better overall compared to Alex, who is the solo director of the company. And in some cases the household setup also gives access to savings that the one director setup would simply just not get. For example, the employment allowance, which reduces the employer national insurance cost when salaries exceed the £5,000 threshold. Alex cannot benefit from this because he is the only employee of the business and he is also the director. So even if he pays an efficient salary up to the personal allowance of £12,570, he still needs to pay an additional £1,135 to cover employer national insurance. But Ben and Emma can avoid that altogether and reduce their employer national insurance by up to £10,500 for the year, as long as both of them are paid at a level, creating an employer NIC exposure. And maybe their extraction strategy still include salary and dividends, but their situation and goals are different. They are now thinking about how to make the entire household more efficient. And if they have older children who genuinely help in the business and do work that is commercially important, that can be part of the picture too. Maybe they help with editing, filming, social media, packing orders, or other real jobs in the business. Again, the rules are simple. They need to do real work, receive fair market wages, and be properly set up on payroll. But if everything is above board, this kind of planning can save real tax and help the household at the same time. The third type of director is someone who is growing a company but does not need income from it yet. Let's call this director Sarah. Maybe she still has a day job Monday to Friday. Maybe her partner covers more of the household while she builds the business. Or maybe she has a savings behind her. The point is, Sarah is not under pressure to drag every pound out of the company just because it's there. And that opens up a different strategy. Because if she does not need the money personally right now, the company can start doing more of the heavy lifting inside the business. It can pay for training, it can buy equipment, it can cover software, subscriptions and tools, it can fund the things the business actually needs to grow. And if the company makes profit, Sarah might simply leave a lot of it there instead of taking it out early and creating extra tax personally for no reason. And that would give her a few more options later. Maybe next year she wants to go part-time at her day job. Maybe the year after she wants to go full-time in the business. Maybe she wants a cash buffer in the company before making that jump. That is why her strategy looks different from the other directors. They need their company to support their life now. Sarah needs to grow the company. That's why for her, the smartest extraction strategy may be to extract very little or even nothing at all. And finally, we have Tom. His company is doing well enough that the problem is no longer how do I fund my life. His problem is I have already taken enough, what do I do with the rest? And this is a very different situation. If Tom keeps taking money out of the company just because he can and they're there, that can become very expensive very quickly. So for him, longer term planning starts to make a lot more sense. Company pension contributions become far more important. And that's because the company gets a corporation tax deduction when you make an employer contribution, and you avoid an immediate personal tax bill as you're moving money into a longer term retirement planning. Retaining profits beside the company also becomes far more important. Timing starts to matter more. The difference between can I take it and should I take it becomes much more important. Maybe Tom wants to build up funds for future investments. Maybe he wants to buy property through a separate legal entity like an SPV or a special purpose vehicle. Maybe he wants to have a holding company to protect his intellectual property. Maybe he wants to build family wealth over time by setting up trusts. And this is why his scenario is different. Tom is not solving only an income problem, he is solving a planning problem. He already has enough to live on. Now he needs structure, timing and long-term thinking. And that is a completely different level of conversation. So yes, the foundation may still look familiar for a lot of directors. Salary might still be there, dividends may still be there. But the smartest strategy is not about staring at those two words in isolation. It's about understanding all the different ways value can move from the company into your life. Sometimes that is cash. Sometimes it's the company taking over a cost you were paying yourself. Sometimes it's tax efficient benefit, or paying a family member for real work, or pension funding, or simply not taking money out too early for no reason. And this is the real shift. Value extraction is not just what lands in your bank account. It's everything the company can do within the rules to support your life more efficiently. And once you start thinking like that, the strategy stops being one size fits all very quickly. And this is the mindset shift I promised at the start of the video. And if you're still not sure how this applies to you, I help business owners with this every day. So I've left a link in the description below where you can book a meeting with me and go through these things properly. So now you know how different tax strategies can fit different situations. But all of this sits inside a much bigger question, which is whether the UK is still a good place to build and keep wealth in the first place. So watch this video next, where I break down whether the UK is still worth it for business owners.